Yeah, to be honest, is my first time as a journalist and an anchor. So please help me doing this task for today. But it's a great honor, as Pierluigi said before, and let me say, and pleasure to have the opportunity to introduce you to the Italian community of surgeons. For people who may know you, Andrew Kirkpatrick is one of the most eminent surgical personalities in the field of acute care surgery, and not only medical care and trauma. And Andrew is a professor of surgery at the Department of Surgery and Critical Care Medicine at Foothills Medical Center of the University of Calgary, Canada, Alberta. And he's here today with us to talk about his recent publication entitled "Are Surgeons Going to Be Left Holding the Bag?" That is going around incisional hernia repair and intra-peritoneal non-absorbable mesh positioning, and especially regarding the complication of this type of intervention. The publication the paper has been published recently in Journal of Clinical Medicine. So, Andrew, let me thank you to be here with us today. I went through the manuscript several times during the last few days, and every time I did it, I found some new perspective into it to talk about. If you agree, I will pose some questions to you, starting from some quotes from your paper, which I personally found of a particular interest for me and also for the audience, and which probably will leave room for further discussion in the next days. First, I would like to know from your voice whether the idea of this paper came to you from a real life experience. And if yes, if you could tell us something more about it.
You know what? I would absolutely love to. And Mauro, thank you. I thank you for this opportunity. I also thank you for being a co-author. And I would very much start with a disclaimer that, I have been doing hernia surgery for over 30 years now and trying to learn more about it. There is so much I don't know. And writing this paper, I tried to answer some questions and go to the literature. And I will admit I was disappointed, as I think most guideline committees always start with a disclaimer. Here's our guidelines, but it's based on terrible evidence. And Mauro, yourself, and colleagues all around the world tried to help us put the data get together as best as we could. But as I'm sure will come out in our conversation, there are many gaps, and I have many more questions and answers. But how this all came about was sort of an epiphany, as somebody becoming not senior in position, but senior in life. I kind of feel taken advantage of a little bit. And I will give, with your permission or with my apologies, a call out to anybody that would like to participate in the closed or open after laparotomy for severe complicated peritonitis, or the COOL trial, where we're trying to answer a critical question regarding using the open abdomen for sepsis. So please, anybody, again, Italy is probably the most supportive country for COOL, and I would love everybody to help us with COOL. And that's a whole other topic that I won't mention again unless there's specific questions. But when we originally started COOL, we had support from the company that made the Abthera dressing, and then subsequently there have been a couple of corporate buyouts, and then the 3M Corporation took over the company that makes the Abthera and promptly canceled the research contract and just said, you didn't look at page 27, clause 13B, where it says, even though we support science, we don't have to if we don't feel like it. And I go, what? And how can this happen? And talking with my colleagues, they said, well, why would they? Why would a company want to do research that might prove their product is really helpful or might not? I go, well, don't they have to? And I started to read a little bit. And then I realized that medical devices are fundamentally different from pharmaceuticals. And I think there's some questions later, and I can talk more about it. But I recognize that our governance from our governments, and again, I will not speak. I did not read a lot about Europe, but I believe it is very similar. But in the United States and Canada, you don't need evidence to market a medical device. It's considered different from a pharmaceutical. You just have to prove it's substantially equivalent to something that has been available since 1976 and typically was never proven back then. So anything that's on the market, if you can prove your new thing is equivalent, not better, not even safe, you could market it. And so that was an epiphany to me, because all my life I'd assumed, when you're learning, right? There's so much to learn as you're a surgical resident. They say, here, put this in, and you do it because you assume it could never get into your operating room unless it was safe and effective. At least that's what I assumed, and I think most people assume that. And I recognize that is completely not true. And then my main passion, I have many passions, but I'm a trauma surgeon. When I work mostly on weekends and evenings. So what I would do in the daytime, well, hernias, gallbladders, and appendixes. And I started off with my time in my career, we did overuse the open abdomen. So we created massive hernias. So we became the people that started to fix massive hernias. And over the course of 30 years, as I've become more interested, I tend to get a lot of the catastrophic hernias with loss of domain and more intracutaneous fistulas. And I try to figure out, all the guidelines are go back, see the original operative record and figure out what it is. We can never find that. These meshes were put in 10, 15, 20 years ago. There's no OR records, but and talking with my colleagues around the world by email, when we started to write this paper, everybody is saying, yes, this issue of catastrophic mesh complication is much more common than we were ever taught. But there's no data on it. So I think that's where it became a challenge to, let's try to learn as much as we can as a starting point for going forward.
So Andrew, you focused on the first issue I would like to remark, and that's the I know and you better explain us that we don't have enough data about what happens when we put a mesh inside the abdomen, and you say that that's because we need longer follow-up times, and probably we need permanent registries to assess this type of complication, which can occur even 5 to 10 years later. We put a mesh inside the abdomen. So what do you think about it? Do you think that permanent registry of intra-peritoneal mesh placement is the proper way to address this issue? It's like something similar to what you did with previous registries on biological meshes and so on. You think it's a proper way also to consider this issue?
I'm going to say yes, absolutely, and probably put my answer as 2 major points. And I'm going to come back to the registry issue. And I do suggest that going forward, point 1, though, is even before we come to a post-operative registry, I believe to use something that comes in and says, here, try this new thing and we'll know 20 years from now whether it worked or not. Like that just doesn't make sense to me. That I do think devices need to be treated like pharmaceuticals, that there should be good data, that there's an onus on a manufacturer to prove that the device is not only effective, but it's safe and it actually is cost effective. Because if it's just the same as something else, which is how it gets marketed or how it gets approved, then why do you need it, right? We don't like, there's a confusing array of choices right now. Why do we need another choice that has no evidence? So I think step one is that I personally think, as I'm seeing these catastrophic cases that I believe are linked, there's many unknowns that got into people's operating rooms 15, 20 years ago with no, with just marketing, that shouldn't be okay. So we shouldn't even start off with this new thing that has an unknown risk that we're only going to figure out in post-market surveillance. But then if that's happening, and for everything that we're using right now, all the devices and all, meshes and almost everything, like implants of any nature. And I'm not an orthopedic surgeon, I'm not a vascular surgeon, but there's all this stuff we put into people. Absolutely. I would suggest that every operation now should be in a national database that can be analyzed to see trends that come from hundreds of thousands of operations. We now have a provincial data registry. I can look at patients' medical charts almost anywhere in our province. Which, it's a big geographical province. It's not a very populous province. So the technologies and the informatics to do these, major ongoing databases to answer specific questions, but also questions that come up in the future are absolutely possible. I don't know from the, and again, the money part of view or paying for the funding, but yes. And I guess, and then a third point, I will call out Italy as, in general, going back to my cool experience, Italy seems to have some of the most proactive surgeons willing to do research and help to answer questions as a culture. I think, and certainly in Canada, we don't have a culture of research. Our health boards want to look after people. They want to provide surgery, medical care. The health boards have no interest or mandate to do research. And it's always struck me as ironic that it's so hard to do a trial to find out if something is helpful or not helpful. But if I just have an idea and I say, oh, I have an idea, I'm going to put this horrible thing covered in asbestos in, somewhere, I can say, well, that was my surgical choice. And I'm allowed to do that. But it's so hard to do research. And
I think this focusing on our issue of today is it's even more important because actually we don't have, as surgeons, I say, we cannot do anything in the pre-market phase of devices that are being released in the market. So I think we should do something in the post-market phase. And in my opinion, this is my personal opinion, registries are the only way we can use to assess a wide range of benefits, but also of drawbacks of new implants and new technology. And I think that in particular, surgeon must play an active role in requesting monitoring data and also navigating the collection of this data, but also conducting themselves the monitoring process. That's whenever possible, I presume. And the last phase of this process is the production of scientific evidence. because we can do something of beneficial to the surgical community only if we publish this data. Taking back to the...
I absolutely think that agree with you that, the lowest hanging fruit or the most obvious next step would be a registry. And I have participated or supported Federico Coccolini with his Aurora registry, which is a tremendous resource. I think, and the registries are great for looking at trends and bringing up questions. And then really, I do think that we need you need to do truly adequately powered randomized trials to answer those questions though. And that's, there's a huge scarcity of that.
Yeah, Federico established quite a lot of registries or permanent registries regarding emergency surgery in Italy. And I think they are very useful for trying establishing evidences. The first quote that grabbed my attention in your paper was as follows. You say that contemporary hernia surgery is now practiced under the bright lights of medical legal challenges and social media misinformation. And this is then combined with an array of mesh choices, providing for significant confusion among practitioners. The only way, in my opinion, to overcome this issue is that surgeons must know perfectly the physical and biological properties and characteristics of the abdominal mesh implants, and everything everything we are going to implant beyond what is reported in the instructions provided by the market need to be known in deep by surgeons. What do you think about
it? Sorry. And it's my hearing issue. I may have missed the very last part of your question, so redirect me if I went in the wrong direction. But I think very much.
Sorry, I say that surgeons must know the characteristics.
Yeah.
Anyone connected with the microphone on?
Ideally, yes. Ideally, we would understand everything to do with meshes and all the benefits. And I think I would give a probably another disclaimer right now that I use mesh in almost all 98% of my hernia repairs. I think mesh greatly benefits patients. I tell patients that. I now have a much longer informed discussion with my patients though. We talk about mesh. I didn't do that 15 years ago. I just said, I'm going to fix your hernia. I'm going to put mesh in, and we went on. Now we go through all the controversies. And so I'm not here just to say, don't use mesh or mesh is terrible. I'm just saying we need to understand mesh, just like you, I believe, suggested. We need to know as much about it as we can. But we're still surgeons, and we ideally we're so busy and we have so many patient factors to worry about. I always, for most of my career, had assumed that somebody had already figured this all out. And when we open it in the operating room, all the homework has been done. And this is a safe, effective device that now I am, at the end of this whole chain of research scientists and regulators and marketing and hospital supply, at the end of this long chain, it's us and the patient. And we're the person that actually did it. And then when a patient has a problem, they don't come back to anybody else. They come back to us and they say, look what's happening. So I think we should know as much as possible, but we can't know everything. And we shouldn't be in that situation where there's so many unknowns. And that quote about practicing under the bright lights of, you know, medical legal consequences, we don't have it as bad in Canada as I believe they do in the United States. And I have heard some presentations and had discussions with American surgeons who now, so there's billboards that say, you know, did you have a hernia? Have you got pain? Well, here's where you call me to sue. And I think we're going to an environment where even when you do everything as best as you can, there may be medical legal consequences, which are I'm going to assume are mostly unjustified. You know, I don't, but that's the reality of the world we live in. And I think the best solution I've always been told to manage that is to do the best job you can, be the most open you can, and know the most. And so that calls for better research, not an absence of research. And that is, and even, you know, when I was I used PubMed for searching for scientific papers, but I'm always amazed when I search on PubMed, I find this amount of information. When I Google, there's this much information. And patients don't use PubMed, they use Google. And I'm amazed at how much, what I believe, disinformation. A patient's never going to get to the truth about hernia mesh when they Google. All they're going to get is legal sites that will say this absolutely, this is, you know, the mesh did this with complete certainty. And I go, how can they say that? There's no science, but I don't know, it's Google.
Yes, and that's the next question for you, because another issue concerns the fact that a wide range of complications have been imputed to mesh positioning. The vast majority of whose have never been confirmed by scientific evidence. And I worked recently with Barbara East and Andrew DeBose about mesh complications which were presumably related to teeth loss, which is an aspect that never been confirmed in the literature. But the problem is that the propaganda in non-medical channels, so that the non-medical dissemination currently has a greater impact in terms of audience than scientific publication have. And this is a huge source of bias that the surgical community should be able to manage and to navigate towards a safe way, as you told earlier. Another problem is the follow-up time, because as you remarked in your paper, patients with enteroprosthetic fistula tend to present much later than the commonest follow-up period time in scientific work. So is there any suggestion from you to try to overcome this issue?
I think a national or the biggest registry possible is probably the best way to do that. And, you know, I'll admit, I tried to read everything I could. I'm not a expert on the FDA practices, but I think post-market surveillance with the FDA 510K, workaround. Really, it's a way to get it. It's a shortcut. It's a loophole. You know, this 510K process. I believe it, asks for 5 years of follow-up. I don't know how that follow-up happens because it's voluntary, and nobody's ever come. Nobody, not that I know of, has any company ever come and checked up on one of my meshes. So I don't know how this happens, but it's 5 years, and you're right. I'm seeing patients, and not just me. Like I'm not sure how it works in Italy, but there's one or two of us in every big city in Canada that kind of get the enterocutaneous fistulas come to us because we either have an interest or we don't run away fast enough. But they yeah, it's 5, 10, 20 years later that these, and it's always a really hard decision as to what to do, because these patients 20 years later often have major comorbidities. You know, they're frail, and I kind of say it's
They
all or
got
nothing. You know, we can't do a small operation. This is going to be a big operation, going to rebuild your abdominal wall, resect most of the mesh, and probably resect bowel. And it's always hard. And you know, I try to pre-optimize people, but I you know, at least I haven't got a number. This would be great. Like again, these are all great topics to study, but I'm sure a quarter to a third of people, I'm just too scared to operate on them. And we say, you know what, you're going to have to live like this, and it's terrible.
Yeah, totally agree with you. And now we come to the heart of the matter. And your article, I quote you. You say that no matter how complex the manufacturing, evaluation, regulatory infrastructure, it is the individual surgeon and patient who take the irreversible leap of faith to permanently implant mesh within a human body. So, Andrew, I think we are not going to be left alone. I think we are already alone in this the decision. Am I wrong when I say that this is the heart of the matter in your article?
It, yeah, and sometimes I may regret the title a little bit, because it makes it feel like I'm feeling sorry for surgeons, and I'm really feeling sorry for patients. So, you know, in retrospect, I might adjust that a little bit. But it is, you know, all these people involved in this big process. You know, it's you as the surgeon and you alone that will be taking responsibility typically for what happens. And I know that every surgeon out there wants to do the best for his patients. And but we have to have, you know, if you're running a busy general surgery practice, this is just one of many things you have to worry about. We can't, again, as mentioned, we can't be experts in everything. I I think we should demand that anything that we are taking the leap of faith to put into a patient's body should be proven to be safe and efficacious. And I think that is the heart of the matter, that I think we as surgeons need to say the current situation is not okay. We demand better evidence, like from everybody, from regulatory bodies, from industry, and I think from academia. You know, so that, thank you. I do think that's the heart of the matter. Maybe the heart of darkness.
Yeah, yeah. From what you wrote, I had the perception, I have the feeling that you are a man that has nothing to lose, because the article is very strong in some aspects. You say that in your opinion, and in my opinion also, all the devices that are going to be released in the market must go through a phase 1, phase 3, and finally a phase 2 prospective randomized trial before they can be released in the market. Do you think this is possible also for all kinds of types of implants and all kinds of types of energy devices or something like that?
I think it's possible and necessary, and I but I guess it's only going to be possible if um, you know, society and our regulatory bodies mandate that it's now required. And I guess I shouldn't be too hard on industry. Like again, I have, and I'm, you know, I have some disclosures. I work with some companies, so I'm, you know, I have consulted for some entities. If they don't have to do it, and they are business people, not scientists, then why would they? You know, it's an unnecessary business cost. And I think that was, you know, when thalidomide, there was, you know, as an example, I read some, I can't believe that story. And I just say, anybody who hasn't read about thalidomide has to read about thalidomide. But, you know, if you don't have to, you won't do it. That's human nature. Like, we all take the easiest path most of the time. That's how society works. So if there's no requirements to jump over that hurdle, why would you? And so you know, when I say a hurdle, I think it's just good practice that we need to do good research. And I know, you know, it's hard to do surgical research, but it's also hard to get funding to do surgical research because there's no, you know, I know I retired from ICU a little while ago, but in the ICU, there is all kinds of funding because we study medications. And so there is all kinds of infrastructure supplied by industry because they're required to. In surgery, there's nothing because we're not required to. And I think that's a fundamental disconnect, that internists use drugs, we use devices. And why are they different? Because they both have potential to hurt people.
Even because, in my opinion, if we don't take this responsibility, the market is going to do it for us. Because as you remarked in your paper, and I quote you again, although accurate data are not available, the internet will suggest that there are more lawyers specializing in litigating hernia, in litigating hernia mesh, then there are surgeons specializing in mesh hernia repair. And these lawyers seems to enjoy a greater degree of confidence regarding evidence appraisal, as they dramatically inform patient as to, for example, the symptoms that allergies to mesh produce while soliciting business. Everyone among us who make evidence assessment knows how challenging it is to do it, especially in the time when we use grade to assessment of evidence. So people out there are taught to master evidence synthesis better than clinicians. And in my opinion, if we don't take this task, if we don't take this responsibility, the market and the lawyers are going to do it on our behalf.
Yeah. You know, I was amazed, and again, please bring me back if I missed. It's literally, it's a hearing thing. I have hearing aids, but I only use them for flying airplanes. Other than that, I leave them at home. But I was amazed late at night when I'm Googling, you know, mesh, and it's just, even in Canada, and I know it's worse in the States, how it was endless legal sites looking to recruit patients for legal action. And I just go, I can't believe how many there are. So that's a very unscientific statement, but at least for Canada, I perceive it to be true, because there's very few there's a lot of great Canadian hernia surgeons, but I don't think there are almost any. If there are, there's just a handful, maybe at the Schuldeis Clinic, who just do hernia. But it seems like there are lawyers that just say that's all they do. They do hernia. And that was the example regarding autoimmune phenomena. Like, does your mesh cause autoimmune disease? And I think I mentioned in the paper that any foreign body will incite an immune system reaction. That's not a disease. That's just normal human physiology. And there was one case report out there that seemed to link mesh with autoimmune diseases, but to my reading and analysis of the literature, that has been debunked as false. So really, you know, us physicians would conclude there's absolutely no link between prosthetic mesh and autoimmune disease that's been established. But yet the lawyers say, you know, oh, that's exactly why you have your autoimmune disease. Come, let me help you sue. And so it is in the absence of great data, there's going to be a vacuum, and that vacuum will attract opportunity for medical legal profit, I think.
Yeah, I agree. So we are going to close this nice discussion, and I leave you with the last statement of your paper, and which probably will leave room for a little debate with Francesco and Pierluigi. You state at the end of your paper, you state that we continue to perform prosthetic mesh-mounted incisional hernia repair, but we believe it is prudent to avoid intra-peritoneal placement of any prosthetic mesh until adequate and conclusive scientific studies have been completed. So is working on the side of safety our next motto?
That is my personal opinion, and I always haven't avoided a pure intra-peritoneal mesh. I believe it's, and you know, and I could quote the various societies that have also, and authors have concluded the same thing. But my ultimate conclusion is we don't know. You know, if to make a recommendation, I think we just need better data. And I would suggest the next step that I would like to personally see is a World Society of Emergency Surgery consensus paper regarding the questions, and any other organization that has a vested interest, you know, just to review these questions again and to set them up properly to, you know, identify what we need to answer. And that's the first step in answering them. I recognize doing good trials to answer them is really hard. And then finally, again, any opportunity with a microphone or a camera, please call me if anybody has any interest ever in cool. But again, thank you for this wonderful opportunity to speak.
And I like this approach so much because it's a real scientific approach to clinical problems. So I totally agree with you, with your approach, with your mindset, and I hope this nice conversation will enter the heart and the mind of all surgeons who will hear it, because again, this is the real scientific approach we should implement in our daily clinical practice. So thank you for this nice conversation. Pierluigi and Francesco, would you like to say something more?
No, I only think that thank you for your availability and for interesting topics that you spoke about. It was for me a real pleasure to know your opinion about this argument, referred by one of the most important surgeon on emergency, and I believe in general surgery too. I have learned a lot, and I hope to transmit your opinion to the Italian group as soon as possible. So I hope to meet you physically, but till now I say thank you very much. We are very, very pleased of your presence. I hope to see you again.
Great. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you also to Pierluigi for this opportunity to let me become an anchorman, I mean, a journalist.
You have been a really anchorman. Very good. You did a good job. If you have some problem with surgery, you may change your job in the future.
Not so bad. Not so bad. Thank you, everyone. To the next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Nice to meet you. Bye-bye.